Final take.
And we are live. Awesome. Welcome to the podcast, Nathan. It's pleasure to have you. We've been looking at doing this for a couple of weeks now, haven't we? And I think I've had to change it once or twice. You've had to change it once or twice, but we are here. I mean, when was it that we met? Was it about a month ago or 5 weeks ago?
Yeah, it must have been. Yeah. Torvine College.
Sounds about right. Yeah,
I
up in
think.
Newport.
Yeah, that's
Or,
right.
or
Yeah,
Cwmbran,
Cwmbran.
actually, I think, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, just for context for everyone listening, so me and Nathan, we are both role models for Big Ideas Wales, which is like a Welsh government service offering like entrepreneurship, business support, and things to people between 11 and 25 years old, or up to 25. And yeah, we were both at an event a couple of weeks ago. We ended up having a chat, wasn't it? We were just talking about podcasts, talking about life, and yeah, mentioned about doing this podcast. So here we are today. I mean, just to, like, obviously, I know a little bit about you and your background and stuff like that, but do you want to just tell everybody who's listening and watching just who you are, what you do, and yeah, just go from there?
All right, sounds good. Well, thanks, Ray. Thanks for having me. Yeah, when we met, it was weird, wasn't it? Because like we got talking, realized we were into the same stuff, and then you told me about the podcast, and I was like, we should be just saving this for our conversation on the podcast. They should just come on and we'll have a chat. And then the more we were talking, the more we realized we had to talk about, didn't we? So yeah, it's nice to be here, man. And I've enjoyed listening as well, as I was just saying to you. I've enjoyed listening to Barefoot Dutchman and Robin Inthorn, is it? I thought it was very good.
Yeah,
Really
yeah.
inspirational. And yeah, just some really good. Nathan Joseph, I thought was great as well. So a bit about me. I've got a varied background, really, but I'm a comedian and a writer. That's what I do now. And I got a background in video production. So I started at about age 20, I guess. Started freelancing and then started my own video production company when I was about 24. So really trained as a cameraman and editor. But at the same time, I was doing stand-up while I was in university. Or I did my first gig when I graduated, and it was the most terrible gig I think I've done in my life, probably since and before. And basically, the story goes there was a night at the Fontagary Inn in Barry, or near Barry, near Roos, and they weren't expecting comedy. It was just a band on. And I thought I'd go and try my hand at stand-up comedy. Took all my friends down there. And the rule of thumb is you do 5 minutes. If it goes well, you carry on. I didn't know any of this. I thought you could just rock up and do as long as you wanted. So I did like 20 minutes. And people were just, it was an abomination, honestly. And people were just like wandering off to the side of the pub, not even listening. So it was just my mates listening. And then the video production business kind of went like that. And stand up kind of went like this because it's obviously low paid for about 10 years with stand up, right? But video is quite well paid. And so I started getting more and more money for that. Met my now wife and needed to settle down. So I was kind of, what went hand in hand with stand up was I was partying a lot, right? And doing the wrong kinds of stuff, staying out all weekend sometimes and drinking too much and, sniffing too much and whatever else. And I really need to sort my life out. And then 2007, I know this is a long version of tell us a bit about yourself. I do apologise.
Hey, no, like I said to you, this is what it's about. Yeah, go as long as
Tell
you
me
need
if I'm
to.
talking too much, won't it? So I needed to settle down basically. 2007, then I nearly went to jail because I got into a fight, and thought, right, I really need to do something now. And thankfully, my now wife is kind of like not into any of that lifestyle, partying or drinking or anything, and just really settled me down. It was just what I needed, and even to the point where I wanted to give up smoking. And Michelle was just like, "You stink," all the time, right? And I'd smoked since I was like 16, 17, so we're talking 10 years of smoking, and then eventually that kind of obviously wore off, saying you stink. And I gave up smoking, gave up drinking, all of it really. So bit by bit, it's all gone, and kind of that's where I am now. I'm kind of fitter and healthier, and then I closed the video production business. The story there goes, I kind of burnt out, So this is why I enjoy doing the talks that me and you do, right? Because I get to talk about like to the young people the truths about running a business. Like I thought I could just, with the business. I know you ran a tattoo studio, didn't you, when you were 19?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Did it?
Yeah, yeah,
Did
yeah.
you
19.
suffer the same? Like, was it like hard work?
So, I mean, what people paint the picture of business is that it's glamorous, that it's I think people know that it is hard work, but I don't think we know how hard the work actually is until you step into it. I mean, if you think that there's 10 jobs to do, there's always going to be another 10 that you didn't think were there, but are actually, lingering in the background. But also, in terms of the input that's required from, us as an individual. And I think it's almost like, the business sometimes is like, a size bigger than us in our in our shoes, for example, or actually a size below us, and we've got to kind of break into it almost, and it takes a little bit of time in order to do that. And I think that's where it's really important to have that sort of like resilience already within your character, or at least an understanding that things are going to be challenging for a while, and just pushing through it, and and learning as you go along. Because it definitely isn't as glamorous as people make it out to be. It is rewarding, but it's one of the key things I talk about is really for the first 4 businesses I opened. I think it's the first 4. I had absolutely no love for them. I was doing it because money, status, respect, all of those sorts of things that essentially, though there was if I was to shine a mirror, it would be like, oh, actually, hang on, there's just something clearly lacking in my life over here that I need to go and seek this kind of stuff from elsewhere over here. And you can kind of, after time, you can kind of notice that and see it, and then you can go, well, actually, well, there's no point me doing these particular things because I'm not really going to enjoy them. So I started just pursuing things that actually mattered to me, or made some sort of an impact, or lived up to my values and things. And I think once you do that, it just completely changes the way you interact with life in general, the way you interact with other people and stuff like that. So sorry, I got on a rant there, but to answer the question, I have experienced that.
It's interesting because like I used to show this spreadsheet of jobs that you have to do when you run a business, and it'd be like the listing everything, accounts, bookkeeping, time management, and then that's before you actually get to the business stuff. So you could almost categorize all these different things you were doing, all these different plates you were spinning, even things like PAYE, I was employing staff and things like that. So and I just realized, I thought you had to grow and grow. Nobody told me you don't have to grow. I actually had a mentor at the time, and he said you don't need to expand to a bigger office, right? And I kind of didn't listen, and I went back, registered, and I set up a limited company and all this, and then I realized that my mentor was actually right. All it meant was more work, more paperwork, and the lesson I learned from it. And I always say there's no mistakes in life, just lessons, and because you can only grow and learn from it. So I opened this big new office. The rent was ridiculous, like more than my mortgage. Had the new car, the new van, and my wheel trims got nicked off the van, right? So it's like having a new pair of shoes. Your wing mirror gets it off. When you got a new pair of shoes, someone stands on them straight away, don't they?
Yeah.
Especially the white ones. Remember those in school?
Yeah. Oh, I know this.
So it was a similar thing. Just attracted trouble. So, but there was upside as well. I mean, this is what I talk about as well. Running a business, I think, is really good for us. Yeah. But what were you going to say there, Ray? Something about new shoes?
No. I was just agreeing with you. I was going to say, yeah, it is a. I remember that happening, like you said, and there's nothing worse than it. It's and I think to go into a bit of a stoic sort of approach to that, or outlook on that, I would say that I think it might have been Seneca or one of those. They had this like lamp that they just absolutely, he loved this lamp, for example, but I can't remember exactly how it went down, but I think pretty much because he knew that, because he really liked that lamp, that it was gonna, it was gonna affect him if he, ever lost it, or if it was stolen, or if it was broken and stuff like that. So I think he started to tell himself that it never belonged to him in the first place, or something along those lines. So like when he did actually eventually break it or something, then he'd built a bit of a dissociation to it. I might have done that a bit of an injustice, but it was something along those lines. Because when I think the more that we desire something, if we don't get it, then obviously it hurts. Or likewise, if we really have something that we're like, oh, I love that. I don't know. Let's just say AirPods. Okay, so the AirPods I've got in, I love these. They are great. They're a hell of a tool. Somebody actually robbed them from the LC2 gym about a month ago. Well, probably not even a month ago. And I was gutted. I was like, I absolutely love those things. And then obviously, the cost aside, I just really enjoyed having them. I thought I'm gonna have to pay more again. But if I kind of just thought, well, at some point there's a good likelihood that I could, lose them. So I'm just going to enjoy them while I've got them, but I'm not going to hold them, too much of a thing around it. It just takes the sting out of it a little bit. I did actually get them back. Lucky enough, they've got Find My iPhone, or they're on Find My iPhone, and I literally tracked the guy down who stole them. I managed to corner him the next day in River Island. Yeah, I cornered him in River Island. I'd actually approached him the day before in the gym, and he lied to me about it, because I only asked him if he'd seen them. And he lied about it, and then I cornered him the next day, and he actually had them on him. So, yeah, it was a funny story, that was, actually. But I felt like Liam Neeson. Literally felt like Liam Neeson in Taken.
Will find you.
I did, yeah. I did. I was kind of gutted when I found him. I was kind of gutted because it was like a treasure hunt. It was literally like a treasure hunt, and I was like, oh, I'm gutted now. I want to give him back to him and see if I can catch him again in another 24 hours, and just chase him out, because I was chasing him around to these different places. It was like pinging up in, I don't know, on Kingsway in town, then it was pinging up somewhere else, then it was in Gosignan. So I'm just darting around everywhere, just trying to find him, and then it came up in River Island. I thought, right, I'm going to give it a go. Went in there, and yeah, found him. So, moral of the story: never give up.
Yes, I'd like to picture him like the fact he was hiding or something in the changing rooms, So you had to really search for him, or behind the clothing rails, He wasn't quite easy to find even in River Island.
Yeah, I know he did. He was walking straight towards me actually, and his face just dropped. It was quite funny. Yeah, his face dropped. So yeah, moral of the story: never. Sorry, go on.
No, go on. I think we're overlapping. There must be a delay because I think we're overlapping each other a bit.
Yeah. It should when it comes out, it should be okay.
What happened next? You can't leave us hanging. We want to know what happened next.
So my mate's father was there actually, and I just said to him, I was like, look, I've been following you around all day on Find My iPhone. I know where you live. I know I've literally been to the house and whatever. I said, I know you stole the AirPods. I was like, there's no issue whatsoever. I said, just pass them back. And he kept lying. I was like, look, you've clearly got them. They called the Rangers in town, the people in River Island. And I was like, right, great. They said, like, we'll go out, wait outside. Waited outside with him. My mate's father was there just randomly, and like I said, he waited outside. And I said, look, just give him back before the Rangers come, otherwise, it's going to be worse for you. And he gave him back just before the Rangers arrived, and then obviously he's got banned from town, and he's known as a thief now around town and stuff. If he just give him back and then just left, I wouldn't have had any issues with it, But yeah, he made it worse for himself, to be fair. But like I said, moral of the story: never give up, and always, I'd say, yeah, be persistent.
Be persistent, yeah. Especially when getting your iPods back, right? Your earpods. Yeah, I didn't know you could do that. You can't do it with Anchor ones. I got these Anchor ones, Soundcore, and I don't think you can trace them. So if somebody nicked them, I'd be for the camera. Soundcore ones, I think.
I think I had those ones before, and I'm pretty sure I did lose my two.
Did you?
Yeah.
I've dropped them a couple of times in the gym, but But they're good, aren't they? They're good.
Yeah. Oh,
Handy.
the
But,
AirPods are
yeah,
great.
but
Yeah.
I love
Oh, sorry. Go on. There is a bit of a
AirPods.
delay.
I was going to buy AirPods. These seemed a bit cheaper, to be honest. These Soundcore ones. They came up top on the like YouTube. I use YouTube reviews for everything, and these came up like top, top budget ones. I think so. I like the Anchor products as well. But yeah, man, I love Stoicism as well. I love the Seneca quotes. Like I think one of the quotes is I've got a little book of Stoicism. Have you heard of that?
I've not too sure about that one. I've got the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. So I generally what I do is I leave that in the hut down in Langland, and when we go for the sea dip, I'll read it, take a photo. Well, actually, truth be told, I take a photo of it and I upload that to my stories. But I will either catch up then, like after about 3 days, and read them all at once, or I'll read it when I'm on my story later on. Generally, because I'm cold after the sea dip and I want to lock the hut and get to the coffee shop, so I'll take a photo, upload it, and then I'll read it back on my story later on. But yeah, it is it's really good. It's like one little excerpt from Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, Epicurus, or Plato, any of those. And then it's obviously a lot of it. If anyone's come across those sorts of quotes, sometimes they are quite difficult to sort of break down, aren't they? But what Ryan Holiday does really well is he gives a sort of a real life example or a modern day example, and really breaks down what the meanings are, and then it's how it's applicable to someone's life. And yes, a lot of the time it's quite a lot. There's quite a lot of the time it will resonate with you. The one that's on my birthday on July the 16th is perfect for me in terms. It's something to do with like following your purpose or your sense of purpose and your passions and all that kind of stuff. And it's just really sort of really relevant actually for my life. Actually, I found so. But yeah, not to answer the question, I haven't. I don't think I've heard of that one, but it's probably like little things. Is it? It's bite size.
It's actually yeah, it's quite bite sized, but it's a really good story as well. So I think it's Jonas Salzberg is the writer, okay. And he's a Swiss guy, or Salzgeber, Jonas Salzgeber, I think. Anyway, you'll find it if you put a little book of Stoicism in Amazon, and he tells the story of how he should have been taught Stoicism in university, but nobody told him how to live. And then he tells his story throughout, and then he gives I think it's 55 tips on how to apply it to your life. So similar by the sound of it to Ryan Holiday. I follow him on Instagram. He's really good on Insta, isn't he, Ryan Holiday?
Yeah, he's really good. He's I'd say he's definitely one of the main people who's sort of brought Stoicism to the forefront of social media in general, and most people's kind of radars, I'd say. I think the Daily Stoic in particular, I think that book, because it's just something that's one per day and you just flick it over like that. It's just an easy one to kind of get through rather than having to have an actual book that you're digesting. Because a lot of it, the concepts are slightly hard to get your head around, but I feel like that it isn't something that it is something you study and it is something that you learn, but it's something that you will only benefit from when you actually apply it to your life. And I think that's the key thing. So with Stoicism, or the book Daily Stoic, if it's just one per day, you can kind of try and apply then whatever that message is to your day, or try and tie it to something that has maybe already happened in your life, and think, okay, maybe if I'd done this better or done this differently and whatever. And I feel like just over time, then it just starts to mold your framework almost. It starts to mold your framework for how you deal with certain situations and things like that. And I think the way I talk about that sometimes, it's like putting the scaffolding up so that you can build the building. It's supporting the structure, and so that you can do the necessary work almost. Don't know if that's a good analogy or not.
Love that. It's a great analogy. Yeah, supporting the structure.
Going on to you said something about about Stoicism. The author said about being taught Stoicism while he was in, say, college or university. I think not just Stoicism aside, but about how to manage your mental health, how to manage how to actually live, in a real world. Like you say, you don't really know a lot about that until you leave school and until you actually go find for yourself. And I actually think, to a certain degree, that people, when they go straight to college, straight to university, unless they've actually got their own life experience, which they've had outside, just as things have gone along, or they've actively gone out there and seeked it by maybe going travelling, or by, maybe bouncing around a couple of different jobs, or going to find them, living on their own, or, just doing a few different things, that require them then to sort of be quite autonomous. A lot of the time, I don't know, I think actually, I'm going to go backtrack a little bit, but when I was working in one of the universities, there were kids who were 19 or 20, and they did not know how to do anything in terms of like getting accommodation sorted, in terms of finding work and things like that. They had to rely on like people within the university, or had to rely on people, their parents and things like that, up until like 19, 20, 21. And I just, I found it quite surprising. I just think that, the role in educational establishments should be that it's really promoting ways of understanding who we are, how we think, how we operate, or how we should operate in the world. And I know that they try and do that, but I think the curriculum kind of, I know, maybe now a little bit more, but I don't think it really allows for it to a certain extent. It's more about like, oh, you need maths, you need English, you need this, you need that, rather than saying, right, this is how you, if you're struggling with mental health, these are the tactics and the tools that you can use in order to deal with it. Also, this is the importance of pushing yourself to a challenge, for example. Like, so challenges, I literally done that one challenge this morning, and going and doing these crazy challenges, or these things that are physically or mentally difficult, the overcoming of them builds that resilience, both physical and mental. And there's a great deal of importance for stuff like that, and I think that's, things like that, and or an awareness about that kind of stuff is just really, it's not talked about, I don't think, unless you find the odd person who's going to actually break the mold and talk about it. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's changing. I think the conversation is more open now, isn't it? About mental health. And, I was in Bridgend College just last week, and I did a talk about health and wellness, and how that links to kind of self-employment. And I talked about sort of like a top 5, of looking after yourself. And then talked about my dad and stuff. He died quite young. And so I think the conversation is more open now. But I think I agree with you 100%. They should have maybe a philosophy strand, even in school. So teaching people how to, use these meditations and these. I think they tried meditation in some schools, didn't they? And they a lot of students thought it was boring. But things like philosophy and quotes. The one I really love in Stoicism is like, it doesn't matter what happens externally; it's how you process it internally. So no matter what anyone says to you, or what anyone does to you, it doesn't matter, and that's kind of useful as well, as a comedian, because you get a heckler who you might take something to heart, after the gig, but you can just brush it off. And it's the same in your home life as well. Everyone has arguments at home, right? Everyone has bickers, but it's how you process it. If somebody says something to you, you've got a choice, haven't you? You either process it, or you just brush it off and say, I'm not going to let that kind of penetrate.
Yeah.
And you also, I don't know about you, right? But you catch yourself a lot quicker.
Yeah, I mean, when you say you catch yourself quicker, do you mean if you've adopted that sort of framework, or that way of processing things, is it? Or
yeah. So if like in the past you might have got angry quicker, or been like triggered quicker by something, now you just kind of go. Ever since I found Stoicism, things just brush off. I was never really an angry person anyway. I never go looking for trouble. I'm quite placid, but I think the path for me has been like when I burnt out in my first business, I was early 30s, and then I discovered breath meditation. That was the first thing. Then there was Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Have you read that book?
Listened to it on audiobook, and he read it in his voice as well, and it's very slow and calm like this, and it's quite. I think I took quite a few things from it. I was just trying to listen to it while I was running, and I don't really think that was the. Yeah, I was like trail running up, to, going up bloody sandbanks, and I've got Eckhart Tolle then with this really slow, calm voice. I don't think it was like an ideal, an ideal book to listen to during that. But I think the principle of the book for me, it is literally just about finding a sense of presence as often as possible, and that will sort of limit the amount of anxiety or the amount of issues that we sort of face within our lives, because the anxiety thing is makes perfect sense. Anxiety is a fear of something in the future, something happening or not happening, or a sense of dread almost. And it's if you just reverse that back a little bit and go, right, okay, I'm just going to breathe right now, I'm just going to focus on my breathing, I'm going to be in this moment right now. I don't know if in a minute or 10 minutes or an hour this particular thing that I was thinking about and worrying about is actually going to happen. It could, but until that actually does happen, I'm not going to let it affect me, or even going, okay, what can I do right now that's going to change the outcome of what I'm concerned about in a positive way. So it's like it allows you to be more pragmatic rather than allowing it to sort of grab a hold of you and just hold you tightly like that. So you don't like, oh fuck, what do I do? I think it allows you to be a bit more pragmatic, and you don't get that, that those physical sensations and this, the anxiety as much and things once you just step back and go, right, okay, what can I do right now in this particular moment, or can I just exist in this moment right now and worry about the holiday that I've got next month when it actually comes, if you can plan for it and stuff. But yeah, it's just pulling it back, I think, just so we're not spending all our lives thinking about the past or the future. And it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, there's other quotes, like, isn't there, like you say, about if you're worrying about the future. It's like one of the Stoic quotes I really love is like, I'll sail across the ocean if nothing prevents me. Have you heard that one?
No, I haven't heard that.
I think that's out of the little book of Stoicism. It might be Epictetus, I think, maybe. I'll sail across the ocean if nothing prevents me. But it's like, so you can plan ahead. You can go, right, I'm going to plan my week like this, and I'll go to the gym Tuesday if nothing prevents me, and then that kind of lets you off the hook, because as you know, things, when you're running 4 businesses like yourself, things go wrong, Are you running 4 businesses at the moment?
No. So there was I 4 businesses I set up. They were the first 4. One was the tattoo studio, so I had that for about 2 and a bit years. Better Gentleman was a clothing shop, had that for about a year. Had a food delivery franchise for a little while. Oh, sorry, an online fashion marketplace for a little while, maybe 6 months. Didn't really go that well. And a food delivery franchise as well, which I had for a couple of months. Hated that. But since then I've got Ideas and Beers, which is pretty much a business. It's a community and events basically, where I just, like, we had one last night, get a couple of people in a room having a few beers, having a conversation about self-development. The other community is the Webb band. That's not a business, but then I've got the coaching business, which is like, I'm self-employed doing that. But a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now, I'm doing less of the one-to-one stuff and just more of the workshops, talks, programs and things with mostly educational establishments, some of it with big ideas, and then others then through the council and a couple of other things. But a bit of a mixed bag, but it's essentially the business is me now. And I think the one big thing I did learn is that a business can fail through external circumstances. We can do things that might have done it better, change things and make it better. But when you are the business, the only time you fail is when you decide to give up. And I think that's it's a really interesting one.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you just like overcome the barriers, don't you, and just kind of move on. But I think sometimes you can get a bit kind of bored in a business as well. So like, I don't know, my first business, it wasn't so much I was bored, the video production. It was just like, I think the office was very expensive, and the staff, I talk about this in colleges sometimes when I do talks with them, the staff were doing all the fun stuff all of a sudden. So they were doing the video editing, which I loved, right? So all of a sudden I was doing the accounts, I was doing the books, I was doing the invoicing and chasing people and so on for payments. You know what it's like, and the staff were doing the fun stuff. So I had to really look at what I loved, and I thought, right, shut it all down and go back to freelancing, essentially, working from home. And then my daughter was born, and because I'd been self-employed for so long, I got now to spend all this time with my daughter then, so just literally would do a bit of video editing, and then or go out and shoot stuff, and then spend time with Livy, so it was great. I wouldn't change anything about that. And this is why I just believe everything for a reason. I'm a strong believer in, we're in the right place at the right time, and we meet the right people all the time. For example, us being in Torvine College, just bumped into each other doing that stall together, talking to young people. And I've since listened to your podcast, and like the amount of people you've had. I love the Dutch culture, for example, and you've had, well, 2 Dutch people that I can name, Robin Inthorn and Barefoot Dutchman. So, I've been learning Dutch for 3 years, so it was really nice hearing. I love the Dutch, but I just think they're just brilliant people. I think they're some of the nicest people I've met in the world. I think they're a lot like the Welsh.
Yeah, that's true.
Like a small nation and really friendly. So how did you get to know those guys out of interest?
Well, you've hit, do you know what you've said there? You said about meeting the people, right people at the right time and things like that. So, meeting Anton, so Anton Newtonboom, the Barefoot Dutchman, that was a very sort of synchronicitous encounter, because I've never met him in person, but I did a barefoot, so I did a couple of barefoot runs. I can't remember exactly which one it was. I've done a few. So I've done a barefoot ultra marathon, which is like 30 miles. I did a half marathon barefoot, 5K and a 10K. Or I've done a couple of 5Ks and 10Ks, and I've done a 5K barefoot on the ice as well. But one of those I did. I put up a thing on social media about it and stuff. And there's a girl from Swansea. I've never met her in person, but she's good friends with my friend Sarah, who lives out in Australia. And she owns some sort of charity out in Sydney, and she's seen that I'd done that barefoot run, and she messaged me and she said, "Oh, I've literally just interviewed a guy today for a job, and she said he's walked Everest barefoot, and he done it for charity and stuff like that." She was like, I feel like you two need to connect and stuff like that. This is his socials. And that was it. I just came across him, and I was like, I need to ask him on the podcast. So messaged him, got in touch. We had a chat, got him on the podcast. That was prior to the other challenge he was doing, which was walking across Australia barefoot, first person to do it. And I said then after that conversation, I was like, we'll have another chat then after you finish your next one. But such an interesting guy. And also, there's probably about a year and a half, I'd say, between the 2 podcasts we did. And from the first one to the second one, the amount of growth that I noticed just from having that conversation with him, a year or so later, the amount of growth was phenomenal. He'd learned so much, he'd developed so much, and he talks quite heavily about, healthy masculinity, which I think is something that we definitely need to kind of look at more, as males. The guy to talk to about that or follow is Dan Stanley. Actually, I've got his book here. I haven't started it yet, but a lot of people are raving about it. So it's a shout out to Dan and his book, Rethinking Masculinity. So he Anton Newtonboom very much talks about the same kind of stuff, and it's really interesting because, like I said, I think it's only just starting to kind of come out almost, or it's almost starting to be highlighted now, I think, and it is definitely a conversation needs to be happening a bit more. So anyway, that's how we met, and then Robin Inthorn, so 55 out was his Instagram handle. I don't know if it still is, but he was doing 5 marathons in 5 days.
I followed him just the other day, so I know it still is.
It still is, okay. Yeah. So he was doing 5 marathons in 5 days, and he's ex-military as well. Yeah. He's friends with Anton Newtonboom, so Anton mentioned about getting in touch with him and doing something, so we did one as well. But yeah, it's great. And I love speaking to people who do these monumental sort of challenges, these things that people are like, wow, that's crazy, or that's impossible, or that's stupid, why are you doing that? You know, I think whenever somebody says to you, what the fuck are you doing, you're generally doing the right thing. You know, you're on the right tracks. You know, very much similar this morning, actually, with that. So for context, for anyone listening or watching, this morning, me and two friends, we went up to Pen y Fan, but I really wanted to do it for ages. I've wanted to either walk or run up to the top of Pen y Fan in the cold weather, but without the t-shirt on, just shorts. So I had shorts, trainers, I had my gloves, and I had a hat on, but no t-shirt, and I had the shorts on, and I run 2 miles to the top. It was minus 11 at the top, and it was windier than I'd expected as well. So it was really cold, but it actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was still pretty horrific, and it was a hell of a challenge, though, obviously with the run as well as the actual cold, and then we got into the cold water at the bottom. But, like, that kind of thing, like, it was, you know, in my head I was like, maybe I should just chuck the jacket on. It's fucking cold. I'm going to look a twat. Why am I going to do this? But I just thought, no, do you know what? No, fuck this. I'm doing it. And, you know, those sorts of things, like, for one, it makes you stand out, you know, but that's not, like, I don't really care about that, you know. I want to kind of see if I can actually do it. But also the opportunities you get from stuff like that, then, they're far-reaching, which you would have never necessarily come across if you hadn't actually stepped outside of the norm and just started doing things that really, you know, that you're what you want to do or you're passionate about and stuff like that. And I think we all, society and other people, they try and put us back in our box, and we've just got to go fuck that and break out of that box, you know, at least every now and again. And I think it's interesting to see what happens when we do.
There's always people telling you it can't be done. They're the ones that never do anything.
100%. Did you find that with comedy? So when you started getting into comedy, did anybody say, you know, oh, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, or anything? Was there any doubters that you know, anything notable?
Always. I mean, it's funny because, like, when I did it in my 20s, I really let that get to me. So I'd have people say, oh, you weren't funny. What are you talking about? What are you doing comedy for? You weren't funny. And I heard a really good podcast. It's called the Comedian's Comedian Podcast, but it was with a comedian, I think it's Doc Brown. And he says his mates in school were funnier than him, right? But they had no way of articulating it for the stage.
Right.
And I thought that's probably exactly it, because, like, all my friends are funnier than me, right? But I like writing it and taking it to stage, and I like you say, try doing something a bit different. So in my 20s, I let it get to me. I was like, oh, they're probably right. I'm not funny, you know. But I was always a class clown in school, and there's another thing you said on your podcast, right? I think this might have been Nathan Joseph. I might be wrong, but you were saying about how business people or just self-employed people or creative people tend to struggle in school, and because we struggle to focus on all the maths and everything, but when we're laser focused on something, that's when we really come to life. And that's been the case for me. So in school, I was a class clown because I struggled to focus on maths and all that other stuff. And all I was into was English and media, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So I knew I wanted to either be on stage telling jokes, because I used to make my mates laugh, or I wanted to work in film. And I've kind of done both of those things. So I've written for the BBC and things like that. And it's kind of taken me years to figure out what it actually is. So when I closed that video business, I was like, I know I want to do comedy, and I know I want to write comedy, but I'm probably going to have to get on stage and start networking and building relationships. So there's been a fair amount of, like, going around the country for hardly any money. I've done Edinburgh. I did Edinburgh, and I did. I linked sort of mental health with comedy. That's kind of my niche.
Okay.
So my first show was How to Be Happy, and it was 3 weeks, and I thought I'd really test myself, so I camped up there for 3 weeks, 2018, and put on this show. 2017, I did a recce, so I went up and just checked out the festival and did flyer in for other people, and then 2018 did a full 3 weeks of my own show. And the best bit about that was people were coming up to me after and saying, look, you've been really honest in your show about mental health, and I've struggled myself, and keep doing it. There's a real need for it, kind of thing. So I got a lot out of that. And possibly my favorite show in 2018 was, it was just me and one guy, and I said, do you want me to do the show? And he said, oh yes, please. He said, I'm going back home tomorrow. I said, where's home? He said, Bermuda. So so I did this show to one person. And bless him, he came over after and he put £3 in the bucket.
Yeah.
He said, oh, I really enjoyed that. Here's £3, yeah. Because it's not ticketed at this level. It's like, bucket, pay what you want kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but absolutely 100%. And I try to push myself with comedy. So doing Edinburgh is a bit of a marathon, is something a bit different, And now I'm a bit older. So I started it about 36. So I've been doing it 6 years now. I did it for about 3 years in my 20s. And what's interesting now is people are saying, oh, keep going if it's making one person laugh. So it's almost the right people now I'm listening to. And I always think, don't just be careful who you listen to, but be careful who actually sinks in. Don't let people sink in who are going to try and drag you down, because there'll always be those people, But I look at it this way, right? And you're probably the same as me, but if you did nothing with your life, you'd get people criticizing you, right? And if you do something with your life, you're going to have people criticizing you. So either way, if you're sitting on your ass doing nothing, people are going to have a go. If you're working in a factory, people are going to be going, why are you not using your talent? Or why are you not doing something a bit better than this? Nothing wrong with working in factories, and it suits some people, So I had some factory jobs in between college and uni. And I got to say, like, they were the best, apart from university, some of the best years of my life because of the friends you make there.
Yeah.
And have you ever worked in a factory yourself?
I have. No, I haven't. No, I wouldn't say I have. Actually, I've worked in retail. I've worked in warehouses and stuff like that.
It's a great experience because, like, you're on a line, a production line, for 8 hours a day. So and just doing the same job. So one job I had like a screwdriver, just putting one screw in a stereo, in a stereo factory. In another one, I was working on a cake line, so we were just spinning cakes, and then it'd go off to the next person, spin a cake, go off to the next person, spin a cake, and you've got to make your own fun. So you just got to have a bit of a fucking laugh with everyone. Otherwise, you're just gonna end up just walking out of this. So. Yeah, but my favourite was like one of my mates started.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Call center.
So yeah, I was going to say that day, like, it's almost like the 21st century factory, isn't it? A call center, and I've worked there, and that's very monotonous as well. Yeah. So sorry, I carry on.
No, that was it really. A mate of mine started, and he was on a sieve, so he was at the end of the line on the ice, doing icing sugar, and so when the cakes were finished, his job was to shake icing sugar to decorate it. And I remember looking across to him and going, you all right? He looked at me, he just went like this. And he left by lunchtime. He was just like, no, fuck this.
Yeah.
I think he walked home.
You do.
But yeah, so comedy is for me.
No, I was just going to say, it's like, it's... there was a quote that came up, right? I was just going to say, I tried looking for it actually just then when you were talking. You said about, you're always going to piss someone off, or not piss someone off. You're always going to have people slagging you off or saying this, that, and whatever. And the quote that I remembered, I don't know if I'm going to do it any justice, but it said something like, "If you want to be everybody's friend, sell ice cream," because. Like, yes. Yeah, if you're selling ice cream, you're like, he just sells ice cream. It's like, no one ever fucking hates an ice cream man, pretty much. And the other quote, actually, from American Gangster, it's the Italian guy in American Gangster. He says to Frank, the main character, Denzel Washington, he said, success has enemies, or success has got lots of enemies. What are you going to do? Become unsuccessful? He said, we can be unsuccessful and we can have friends. We can be successful and we can have enemies, or we can be unsuccessful and we can have friends, and it's the choice that we take. I do like the idea of us still having friends by having success as well, but I think the point stands is that you will have people have experiences or things where somebody will try tearing you down, or somebody will slag you off, or someone will try like doing you over or whatever because they want what you've got, or because they don't have what you've got, and they just want to bring you sort of back down. It comes into that tall poppy syndrome as well. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, trimming back the poppies.
Yeah, it's a big thing in the UK, apparently, more so than America. I was speaking to somebody, I can't remember who it was, it might have been somebody, James Smith, perhaps I'd listened to something he said about it. I tell you what, who was Chris Williamson from Modern Wisdom podcast. I heard it on him talk about it. I think it was on his podcast with Joe Rogan, and he said that, in America, for example, that people are a lot more supportive of other people who are like trying to come through and make something of themselves, whereas in the UK it's a lot more like, nope, come on, we don't want you going up there, and they're trying to drag you back down. And that's not to say that people don't sing your praises and don't try and lift you up in the UK. I've definitely, I've got a really good network of people who do that. But it does exist, I think, and it's very more, especially in towns like Swansea where I live, because, historically it's a working class town, and I think that a lot of people who live and work in Swansea, they don't leave, which is fine, because like I love it here as well. I absolutely love Swansea, but I think what that does do then is it creates that sort of tall poppy syndrome where people will be like, oh, well, look at fucking so-and-so trying to think thinking they're this, that and whatever, and trying to do whatever, like this, that and whatever. It just, you know what I mean? There was a girl, actually, Letitia, so I know her brother, and Letitia, she got on the Valleys, remember the Valleys, the show? It was like, yeah. So she got on there, and I don't know what she was doing before that, but when she kind of got on there, I mean, I remember like everybody was. It was quite horrible the way that people were talking about her and things like before and during and after. And I remember somebody like grabbing her hair and trying to pull her down the stairs in a nightclub, literally for no reason, just other than the fact that she didn't like her because of the fact that she was trying to do this and be this person. I don't know. I just think that it's quite interesting how people respond to others who are trying to make something of themselves and do something. And I think the main thing, as long as you're not hurting people, you're not ripping people off, you're not damaging others in any sort of way, or being a prick while you do it. I think just let people leave people to their own accords.
Yeah. It's a tricky one, isn't it? But I think you're 100% right there about like American versus British. Like, I've been to America and San Francisco, for example, they kind of appreciate failure. And there was a saying when I was there that they like to see you fail about 10 times before they'll work with you, because they know that makes you more successful in future. So people like Zuckerberg and that, they're all connected, obviously. So network is a net worth kind of thing. But yeah, they've all had failures, 10 times over before they actually find the thing that they actually are into. But in this country, it seems to be that people don't celebrate failure in the same way. They seem to like, it's almost, some people then, they almost like support you on the way up. They want you to do well. And then you get to a point, it's like, I suppose it's a high poppy thing, and they're like, oh, getting a bit too big for his boots now. And then they like to see the failure as well. So the rise and fall, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, and then, whereas in America, they kind of celebrate that. So I don't know. It's a tricky one in the UK, I think. But I always say, like, for every 9 people telling you, it can't be done, there'll be 11 people telling you it can be done.
Yeah.
So it's listen to them rather than focus on those people trying to drag you down. And sometimes it'll just be one, but for some reason, that one person will stick in your head more than the, other people telling you it can be done. So, like, when I started doing comedy this time, I had messages from people saying, why am I not surprised that you're doing stand-up kind of thing? And so I obviously really bigged me up, I did. And I think it's more like maturity as well. So now that I'm a bit... sorry, there was a message come through.
Sorry.
Now I'm a bit more mature. I'm not going to the same parties and stuff that I did when I was younger, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, I'm now like, I've got a family and stuff, stay home a lot more, and you tend to choose your friendship groups a bit more wisely. So you can kind of like, it's one of the big things for me is like relationships, right? So you focus on good relationships rather than negative, toxic relationships, and that's really good for us. Whereas I think when you're at parties when you're younger, you haven't really got to say who's there.
Yeah.
You end up listening to the wrong people. Do you know what I mean? And there's just always that one twat in the party, but of 50 good people. Do you know what I mean? So, so I think it's just maturity has a lot to do with it as well, and I think relationships are the biggest thing that we can work on. Have you seen the Harvard study of adult development?
I don't think I have. No. What's it about?
So this study is it's a TED talk on YouTube. So if you Google TED talk on relationships or Harvard study on relationships, basically it's like a 15-minute talk, so quite digestible. And he talks about this 75-year study, which happened in Harvard, and he studied people from all walks of life, from the hood up to people, even including presidents, rich people from Boston, and then people from Bronx, I think, in New York, and they studied them over the lifetime, interviewed them. They started off just men, but now it has continued to women and their children, I think, as well. And what he found was, what they found at Harvard from interviewing these people, the ones with the longest, happiest lives were the ones with the best relationships. So it's people who kind of retired from their jobs but still went after more people they call them playmates, right? People to go and play sport with and interact with. But on the flip side of that, I found that if you're in a bad relationship and you've got toxic people around you, then that's really bad for our health. No surprises, right? So the aim of life should be not even chasing money, because some of these people who were rich still had short lives because they didn't have good relationships. And then transversely to that, some of the poorer people had really good relationships and lived to 100. So, so a lot of us think that you should, and this is what I talk about in colleges and stuff, is that some of us think we have to chase fame and success. And I think a lot of kids do that, which is why they go on TV shows, right? And they think that success and fame is everything, when really it should be satisfaction from your job, which is where I decided one day I wanted to do comedy writing because I knew that would make me happy, right? And there's catharsis in performing on stage, and I get it's a real therapy from watching other comedians as well. And and just do what makes you happy, and then foster good relationships. So one of the things, for example, that really bugs me about doing comedy is that if you want to be really good, you've got to travel all around the country, and that would mean leaving my kids. So it's not something I really want to do at this stage. They're still quite young. They're only 6 now, 6 and 8. So I have to still keep that balance, of not working too hard, which I learned in my first business. I worked way too hard, and thankfully it was before my daughter was born. But my dad, he died really young at 64. And tragically, it was 7 years ago, but he took his own life. And off the back of that, I went through a lot of stuff, obviously self-blame and stuff. And why didn't he talk to us about it? Why didn't he, just open up to us? We're quite a close family. We're from the valleys, and it's taken me till now really to be able to talk about it. So it's funny when you talk about masculinity there. I now open up on stage and I talk about my dad. I talk about our relationship. I talk about how I use my DIY buddy, and he always used to have these sayings like "let the saw do the work." He'd say, "Let the saw do." Have you heard this? I got to tell you, 6 hours I stood looking. 6 hours I stood looking at that saw today.
Yeah.
And it did fuck all.
Yeah.
If there wasn't a delay, that would have been funny, right?
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, it came through a little bit then, and then I got it. Then I got the punchline at the end.
So anyway, he genuinely did die, but I find catharsis in writing jokes about him now, and about our relationship and stuff. And the thing was, the reason he died young and the reason his mental health was affected is because he smoked and he drank and he didn't look after himself, right? So now my message is, and this kind of goes against, I guess, the rock and roll image of comedians, right? But I'm more of a kind of modern vegan type lefty comedian where I'm like, into sustaining the planet, and I like scuba diving and walking my shoes off like you do and stuff like that, and going up mountains and so on. So I'm all about now people should look after their mental health primarily, but if they don't look after their physical health, then that's going to lead to poor mental health anyway, because it's all vascular, right? It's all, I don't know much about the medical side of it, but you block your arteries and your brain is affected, right? And the thing was, my dad, he was a lovely guy, he was a lovely man, did loads in the community, was big in community groups and campaigning for stuff, and but he always had a fag in his mouth and had a pint of beer every night, and ultimately, it affected his mental health so much that he felt the need to, to leave us, and it was really hard, because my daughter was 1, so I was trying to raise this little person, and at the same time then battling my own demons. And the turning point for me was I finally got some counselling. So I was doing a comedy gig, funny enough, and one of the other comedians, he said, what's going on, kind of thing. And this was a really great place as well, a safe space to talk about it. So I was just talking at the bar to this comedian, and he said, you've been through a lot there, mind. You know that with your dad, don't you? And I kind of went, yeah, I think so. And he said, have you thought about Cruse Bereavement counselling? And I said, no, I've never heard of them. So Cruse is Cruse, I think.
Right.
And so I thought I'd give it a go. This might be a useful link in your notes for people who've lost people in the last few years,
Okay, yeah. Cruse. Bereavement care, yeah, I got it.
Cruse Bereavement.
Cool. Yeah, I'll attach this to the link in the podcast.
Cool. So I got a link to. I got a chat from a young girl who was really good obviously trained on the phone, and it was the first time I was able to cry properly. So she said, "Right, tell me about your dad." So I opened up, and I just, like, everything came out, and it was because I didn't know her, and I couldn't cry in front of my family. I was being this strong man, an ex-rugby player, not very good, by the way, but still played rugby growing up. Love the gym, love running, So I was just trying to be too strong, and it's that masculine thing. So then I opened up, it all came out. And do you know why? I only needed like 2 sessions with this counsellor. And she said, just phone me whenever you need me. And it was just having that person, impartial person, to talk to, just really lifted a load off. And then I suppose the next stage was, again, talking to comedians. They were saying how common sertraline is, so SSRI, right? Antidepressant. And I never wanted to take one, even though I'd been offered one after what happened with my dad. I never wanted to take one because I thought dependence, right? I don't want to be dependent on antidepressants. So, but talking to comedians who have kind of experienced similar things and been through a lot, and we're using comedy in a similar way, I guess. They said it's just like it's like a really mild party drug, right? So I'll give that a go then. So I went to see my doctor, and this time my doctor, right? Because you get change in doctors sometimes, don't you? She was young. She had 2 kids. She was completely on my level. She looked at my notes and she looked at what, my dad dying and stuff, and she was like, you realise you've been through a lot here. You might want to give these a go. And by the way, here's some meditations. Here's some tips on like exercise and things like that. Just like things I'd never had from a doctor before. And the antidepressants worked, like unequivocally 100%. Just like I'd recommend anyone going through stuff that needs help out of a dark place, and you're in an hour in about antidepressants, because you think there's stigma attached. I would say just do it, even if it's for a 6-month course, just to pull yourself out of it. And they worked basically. I was like 6 months. I got a new job and stuff, a new day job and things like that. So, and yeah, it's something that I know I can go back to now as well. Sertraline is always there if I need to go back to it, because I know there's no harm in it really. Psilocybin is something I've rediscovered in the last couple of years as well. I think that's going to be the future, in the same way CBD is. CBD.
Yeah.
I think the next big thing is going to be psilocybin microdosing. And of course, our friends in Holland, you can get it in the shops over there, completely legal, microdoses. Pre-packed little tins of truffles, incredible stuff. So, and it's something I'm told it grows in Wales as well. I'm not sure about that, but I'm told it grows in our fields in Wales.
It very much does. Yeah.
But honestly, when we were I'm jumping around a bit, but when we were teenagers, right, in school, we did some Magis, right? And honestly, when I look back now, they were the happiest years of my life, because you'd take a few of those and be giggling your tits off, right, on the mountain camping, and they were easily the happiest years of my life, like when we did mushrooms in school. And I think then you discover weed, and then you drink too much, go to Ibiza and Magaluf and Benidorm, and I just think drink is a depressant, whereas this other stuff now we're finding out is the stuff that makes us happy.
Yeah, I've
microdosing I'm all for.
Yeah, I've only microdosed it for about 10 days before. I microdosed it for about 10 days, and I found on the first day I was like, noticed a little bit of a contrast of colours was a little bit brighter, just in the environment around me. And then, I just found a bit more clarity and stuff. But, I wasn't doing it for long. Like I said, I only did it for about 10 days. And I know with microdosing, it's more about the consistent longevity, of the microdosing rather than just diving in and out. Whereas if you were to take, a macrodose, which I haven't done, I've been quite afraid to do that, actually. Taking a macrodose, a full dose, you get that psychedelic effect. Obviously, you get the, whatever experience that comes through. But then it will... From what I understand, I think some of the research is coming through. I'm pretty confident what it says is so it creates or repairs neural connections. I'm going to double check that. So probably psilocybin neural connection.
Plasticity of the brain, isn't it?
Let's have a little look.
Kind of
Okay, let's have a look at this.
I know it releases a serotonin as well, so I think that's what causes the giggles and stuff.
So yeah, it says previous laboratory experiments have shown promise that psilocybin, as well as the LSD, as well as ketamine, can decrease depression. The new research found that these compounds increase the density of spines, small protrusions found on nerve cells, which aid in the transmission of information between neurons. So essentially, it's helping with, the transmission of stuff between those neural connections, and I think it aids in the repair of them in some respect. That is from Drug Target Review, which seems like a bit of a news company, so I don't know how accurate that is. Reduces blood flow and neural activity in seven brain regions. It's probably worth having a little look about that, anyone who's listening, because like I said, I don't know a great deal, but there's a lot of promising research, like you say, especially when it comes to anxiety, depression, and people's ability to even ability to experience happiness and things like that. I think it just allows you to look at life in this really different way. I think there's a lot of promising stuff about MDMA for that reason as well, which is a slightly different one, so it's an empathogen. I think they've been using that in studies now with people who've got PTSD from war, so actually going to war, soldiers and things like that, and the results have been amazing. I think in one particular study there was a control group who were just having therapy. I think it was psychoanalytic therapy or maybe just normal therapy. I'm not entirely sure, but they're having a certain type of therapy. and there was certain percentage of them which finished the 12 weeks and said that they feel much better. I think it was maybe 20% or something like that. But nobody checked out from the program early, and then most of them were still exhibiting sort of symptoms or still going through that trauma. Whereas the people who were, I think it was a small dose of MDMA they were given prior to a therapy session, so like maybe a microdose of it.
Yeah.
I think there was maybe 20-25% of them checked out of the study early. I think it was out of the study after like maybe 7 or 8 weeks. They checked out early saying that they feel completely fine. But then there was also another large portion, I think the rest of them, maybe there was only a small margin of them who didn't, said by the end of that 12 weeks that they had no issues with it anymore and they feel like they'd completely dealt with it. And the whole idea behind it was that it allowed them to it allowed them to step back almost from the event itself, and then when they're talking about it in a therapy setting, it's allowing them to sort of look at it in a different way, allowing them to step back and look at it in a slightly different way without associating, having the feelings and that like really a trauma in their body, essentially that response in their body that they would usually get thinking about it or having some sort of trigger that brings it up. But yeah, it's worth having a little look at that study, anyone who's listening or watching, just because it was really interesting, how that's sort of revolutionising that field.
Mm-hmm. Is that the film Trip of Compassion by any chance?
I haven't heard of
that. That's one film, and that's about PTSD in Israel, I think. Because obviously the army see a lot out there, and and I think they were trying MDMA studies on soldiers there, and I think similar to what we were talking about, I think, but for the first time on MDMA, they were able to release, so they were able to cry, they were able to talk about what they'd been through, and then felt reset off the back of it, So yeah, I think that's a good film to check out. And then there's Johns Hopkins Psychedelic Research Center, which is paired with the London, which university is
King's
it?
College.
It might be King's College, or it might be UCL, University College London.
Yeah.
So it's Johns Hopkins Centre, for psychedelic research. But you can sign up to their mailing list for up-to-date information. And also they're always looking for people for studies with psilocybin. So, if you are feeling anxious or depressed, then you could sign up for the study. But honestly, psilocybin for me, it was revolutionary. It just like completely opened my eyes. Let me just check. Psychedelic, UCL Psychedelics Research Group. There you go. Paired with Johns Hopkins.
I'm pretty sure
do you know
they did.
Tim Ferriss?
Oh yeah, Tim Ferriss.
So he pumped loads of money into it, famously, into the Johns Hopkins Centre, and he raised like 30 million, I think, for pumping into the psychedelic research, because he suffers himself and he's used various psychedelics to pull himself out of it. And he talks about the plasticity of the brain as well, so similar to what you're talking about there. So if you have a trip every now and then, every 6 months, it just like resets the brain, and then you're fine again. So but it's honestly, it just opens up new worlds.
Yeah, and it's like, I think one thing when it comes to sort of neural connections, for example, I think Andrew Huberman might have talked about this. I'm not sure if it was him. I think it probably would have been. Let's say we are, if we're experiencing anxiety about something, and that keeps happening. Obviously, a lot of the time we don't want it to happen; it just kind of happens. But it happens because we're thinking about a particular thing. you know, or we have situations going on and then we're thinking about it, and the anxiety is almost like, you know, that's where it comes from. But the more that we experience it, the more that we create more of a neural connection. So almost like, it's like essentially if you're walking through the woods, you're paving a pathway, and the more that people walk on that path, or the more times that you walk on that path, the more prominent that path becomes, you know. And I think that's similar to what a sort of neural connection is. And you could even look at it similar to a habit as well. Like, you know, a habit, essentially, it becomes more solidified and easier to do the more that we actually do it. Likewise with muscle memory, the more you train your biceps, eventually the bigger they'll get, the stronger they'll get. And if you stop training them for a while, but then you go back to training them, it's like, oh, we know how to do that, and we get it. You get back to that position or that place where you were a lot quicker. And I think the neural connection is probably quite similar to that, in the sense that, you know, the more that we indulge in a particular thought or thinking, like a process of thoughts, so for example like anxiety or the thoughts that usually exhibit anxiety, the more stronger that neural pathway becomes, you know. And I think you know, obviously the challenging thing then is actually going, right, okay, like how do I stop doing that? But that's where it comes into changing your thoughts. And if you think, actually, hang on, like, if I indulge in this thought right now, is it going to serve me? And sort of going, right, I accept that thought is coming up, you know, this is coming up, I'm going to let that go, I'm not going to indulge in it any further. So like that ties in with ACT therapy, acceptance commitment therapy. You know, so if you are just getting one thought that's coming up, you go, okay, I'm thinking about, the example I always give is gambling. I've probably mentioned this on the podcast before, but like, I used to gamble a little bit, not massive amounts, but I used to gamble quite a bit when I was younger. And if I was driving a certain way home from like college, I would know there's a Bucky's on the way home. I'd be like, oh, there's a Bucky's on the way home. And that's just one thought, okay? But then the next thought is like, oh, I've got 20 quid on me. The next thought is, I could pop in there and do that. And then the next thought might be, oh, no, I'm not going to do that because I need to pay for this or whatever. And then the next thought is like, oh, actually I could, because I might win more and then I'll have more money aside for blah blah blah. All of a sudden you've got 5, 10, 15, 100 thoughts about a particular thing, even if there is some resistance in those thoughts, like, oh no, I can't do that because you're still like strengthening that pathway almost. You're strengthening that particular thought. You know, and it makes it much more difficult then when the more you've strengthened it, you know, the more you've thought about it, it makes it more difficult, because it's like essentially consuming, it's consuming all your mental capacity. Whereas if you kind of, after 2 or 3 thoughts, you go, hang on, whoa, let's stop here a minute. I'm thinking about gambling. I don't want to gamble right now. I'm accepting it for what it is. I'm going to let that go, and I'm just going to go home straight away. You know, just easier said than done. But it's quite an important one, because you're almost recognizing it, shining a spotlight on it, and then deciding to, you know, push it over there instead, rather than indulging it a little bit more. But anyway, the point I was trying to make is, you know, similar sort of thing with neural pathways. We can train ourselves out of it. The more that we, you know, it takes effort, but we can train ourselves out of it and then sort of pave a new path in a new direction. You know, walking in a different direction through the woods and just letting that be the path we walk on. Not sure if that makes sense, but hopefully.
No, I love that. No, I've never heard of ACT either, so I'll look at that after this. So thanks.
Yeah, so apparently it's the third wave of CBT, so cognitive behavioural therapy, ACT therapy. It sort of kind of sits within CBT.
Okay, interesting. I'll look that up. Thanks. But yeah, I mean, 2019, I rediscovered psilocybin, and honestly, it's just, like I said, revolutionary, because whereas I was still on sertraline, but in 2019, I decided to give up booze for a year. So I did this 1 year no beer thing.
Awesome.
And I wasn't a massive drinker, but I knew it was getting me down, right? So like, I'd have a bottle of wine in the house, for example, on the weekend, right? And or like a couple of beers, or if you have a blowout with the lads, you'd have, you know, a stag do was the worst, I think. But you'd have like a bloody, you know, round of shots or whatever, yeah. and then the hangovers. I think, are you over 30, right?
29, 30 in July actually.
How old are you? Are you? Bloody hell. Okay, so once you're over 30, your hangovers, right?
Yeah, I
I
have
hate to
heard.
tell you, but your hangovers might slightly worse, right? So they did, and this is the thing. So it was like it's almost like you can't handle your drink anymore because you hit it so hard. I think in your 20s when you go to Benidorm and Magaluf that your liver just like is about that big by the time you're 35, maybe. So so I knew it had to go. 2019, I finally did it. So I'd have been like 39 then, right? And did a full year no beer. And then got to September, October, and thought I started seeing studies on psilocybin, so I thought I'll give that a try as well. And honestly, like I was getting to bed earlier anyway after no drink, right? And getting up earlier, but on psilocybin, a microdose, you just like 5 a.m. Your legs are just flying out of bed. You're up, when you're wide awake straight away. It's like that kind of feeling,
Okay.
right? You're just wide awake, and the way the Dutch say to microdose is like you do 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off, and you do that for like 2 weeks, and then you stop, right? So another way, like Tim Ferriss does it, is have a big trip, so actual hallucinations and stuff every 6 months. But by the way, we should say for this podcast, it's not good for certain conditions. Like they don't recommend for schizophrenia, for example, that mushrooms are good. So I would say always read the label, but there's no label available.
Yeah.
But for certain conditions, so they're not sure if it's any good yet. Anyway, but for depression certainly and anxiety, but I just think it's a range of tools. So like since that 1 year no beer thing for me, that was revolutionary. Psilocybin was the next thing, and it's like one thing leads to another. So then you get given another book, and then you try another therapy. Like Wim Hof really works for me. I know you're a fan. Cold water therapy, like 100%. I used to have cold showers anyway when I was younger, but I never knew what it meant, why it felt so good. But now I know. I really go for it, And even before this call, I did deep breathing because I think I heard you say, but it's almost like a coffee.
Yeah.
It just boosts you. It just lifts you up. And I always feel euphoric after doing Wim Hof breathing. I don't know about yourself.
Yeah, I haven't. Do you know what? So truthfully, I find the Wim Hof. I like it. I love it. I really enjoy it. I find it quite. I found it. It's the effort. It's quite an effort to do it. Like it's not something that if so for example meditation, I can find that I don't find that so much of an effort. I could just sit here, close my eyes, and just sort of focus on my breathing and kind of get into it. Whereas with the Wim Hof stuff, I find it a bit of an effort to do, much like I find journaling an effort actually. So I've tried different ways of. I do it I do it quite sparingly, so I don't do it all of the time with journaling. And Wim Hof, I do it quite sparingly as well. I don't do it all of the time. I find it just sitting there actually doing that breathing and stuff. I find it an effort, so I've got to be in the right headspace almost to do it. Or sometimes if I feel a little bit bunged up or whatever, which is not that often, I don't tend to get ill, but I'll pull that out of the out of the toolbox then. So you said about using, we all have these different tools that we sort of find over time, and like how I describe it is it's like a toolbox, isn't it? So well-being or mindset or mental health toolbox, and going right, boom, yeah, breath work, I like this is good, pull it out, use it. But yeah, no, sorry, to answer the question, I think the Wim Hof stuff is really good. I think breath work in general is really, really good. And there are different types of breath work for different things. I literally did this with, I was delivering lectures for Swansea University a couple of days ago or last week. And, one of it was less about the well-being of the students, more about the well-being in an organisational setting, because that was linked to what they were studying. And, I mentioned quite heavily about breath work. So I'm doing a breath work instructor training currently. And just by 4 or 5 seconds in through the nose and then open mouth exhale, or just breathe, just exhale in general. If we call it a sigh of relief, don't we? And a sigh of relief is like, and it feels great when we do it. It's that that exhale. it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It calms the stress response and the cortisol, and and we call it a sigh of relief because that is literally what we're doing. We are relieving ourselves of that stress, of that tension, and almost like you find your shoulders and things like that, they kind of, the tension drops, doesn't it? If anyone was listening to this now, if you just go and you just feel a little bit more loose, it's brilliant. And like I said, it's an incredible way of just releasing stuff, doing it a couple of times every day. Especially if you're doing something that is quite stressful, and just taking that little conscious breath, that conscious exhale, or doing a round of breathing, so in through the nose, out through the mouth. I think box breathing is pretty good, so 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds hold, repeating that a few times, and then ending with a couple of exhales, so 5-6 seconds in, so a deep breath in, and then open mouth exhale, and doing that 2 or 3 times. That's why most sort of yoga practices I've been to, they do that at the end as well. It's like you exhale the rest of that practice and you sort of finalize it. It's just a really nice way of closing out, relieving the tension and the stress. So yeah, I love breathwork. It's really, really interesting, and there's so much research, so much stock going into it as well. Not when I say stock, just people investing in it and talking about it and then using it, and also others that are finding it really, really beneficial when they try it as well.
There's a Wim Hof video in there where they show that he's injected with bacteria, and then other people are as well, and he uses the breathing technique, and the bacteria just doesn't get to him. So there's got to be not just feeling good, but actual medicinal benefits as well of doing it, and I think you found your thing clearly with the cold water therapy, haven't you? So you go every day, right?
Yeah.
In the sea.
Yeah, every day. Coming up on 800 days now. Yeah, and I haven't been ill for 3-4 years. Literally, I haven't been ill for 3-4 years. Other than COVID, COVID, I have had a few variants of COVID, but it was, the first one floored me. But that was a couple of months before I started doing the sea dipping properly, and I was going through a lot of stress at the time and things like that, so it was kind of understandable that it floored me. But every time I've had it since, it affected me a bit, but not significantly, I would say. And I put a lot of that down to the cold water, the lower stress levels that come from being in nature quite often as well, because there's a lot to be said for that. If you spend a lot of time in nature, you're lowering the cortisol levels, you're lowering the stress response, which is lowering your inflammation markers and things, I'd imagine. Again, I'm not a doctor, but if that's the case, then you're much more likely then to have a really strong immune system response to anything external that you're interacting with, which could be like COVID or things like that, or just illness in general.
Yeah, no, I think it's funny how things go, because it sounds like you were ready for the lockdowns with some tools and stuff and a toolkit before it started. Or did you develop it through lockdown?
That's an interesting question. I'd say I think I already had quite a few tools in the toolbox in that sense, and I would say that nature, being in nature, being at the beach or running and challenging myself and stuff, those were all things that I was probably already doing, definitely I've been doing it for a good few years now, but they were already things that I kind of had, like you said, as tools. I think the sea dipping, I tried a handful of times prior to that, and it was literally just like me and a couple of friends, we were going to the beach, doing a little beach workout, getting in the sea and getting a little coffee afterwards and stuff, and we just started doing that a couple of days a week. And I think, the accountability aspect of it came when, there was a good few of us going, there was a nice group of us, and all of a sudden it was like, let's get down to tomorrow. And then all of a sudden, started doing consecutive days. So somebody said to me randomly, they mistook me for someone else actually, and they said, "Oh, you're Ryan, the 100-day dipper," and I was like, "I'm Ryan." I said, "I don't think I'm the 100-day dipper," and it turns out there was a different Ryan going to the beach who was doing 100 days of dips. But I was like, I got in my head then, I was like, I like the sound of that. And I thought that I googled. I was like, I googled how what's every day of UK winter. I was doing 4 or 5 days a week at this point anyway. But I googled UK winter, and I thought I'm going to do every day of winter. So it's like 120 odd days or something, and it was literally from the 26th of October until 20th of March, I think it was, the spring equinox. But it was the 26th of October that day, and I was like, oh, okay, that's quite, synchronicitous or whatever, serendipitous, whichever way you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. The fact that it was that day that I'd thought about doing it, had that encounter, and then actually decided to do it. And I've kept it going ever since. But you know what? I don't know how much you believe in this kind of stuff, right? But I find one of the guys who comes dipping figured this out, and it's just blown my fucking mind. So with the sea dipping group, every time it's 11:11, right? So 11:11 in the morning, everyone's like, well, 11:11, and it's like the spiritual or the angel number they call it. And one of my friends as well, he's on the ball with it. Like whenever he sees 11:11 quite a lot, he feels like he's aligned and stuff. And when he's not seeing it often, he's like, fuck, I'm out of alignment. And I feel like the same way as well about angel numbers. I think if I see these recurring numbers and patterns, I always feel like I'm on the right track and stuff like that, But anyway, one of the guys, say it again, 333.
333.
Yeah.
Do you ever notice that? A lot?
Not.
That's an angel number, apparently.
Yeah, not so much that one. 11:11, 12:34, and those are the sort of main ones that I tend to see. I'd imagine, but no, the what I was going to say, my 1111th dip, right? So my 1111th dip, 1111. That is going to be on the 11th of November next year. So it's the 11th, 23 is going to be my 1011th dip. But like, what the fucking chances of that? It's absolutely bizarre. And yeah,
very serendipitous, I was going to say.
Ridiculously, yeah. Especially the fact that, like I said, I thought, right, I'm going to start dipping on this. I'm going to start doing consecutive from this day because someone said about thing. Looking at it and thinking, right, I'm going to do every day winter, and that day was the day I started because it was the 26th of October. That's synchronicitous, but the fact that my 1111th dip is on the 11th, that is, I'd love to know what the statistical chance of that happen is. It's just fucking like wild, but could be a coincidence, but for me, I take it as a sign that whatever I'm doing is the right thing, whatever the path I'm on is the right one, wherever that leads, so
yeah. I just think I often think this, right, that the right doors open at the right time for us, and the right, as we were saying earlier, the right people bump into you at the right time, and things just seem to happen serendipitously. And doesn't serendipitous? I think seren is star, isn't it? I don't know where dippity comes from, but it sounds quite a cool word. It's like a move you'd do at the disco, maybe, isn't it? Dippity, dippity dance. Right?
Yeah.
Seren is definitely from star, isn't it? So
I didn't know that.
It might be considered an ancient Latin word. I don't know, but I reckon it's Welsh anyway. I'd need to Google that, to verify it. But yeah, Seren, stars, the stars aligned,
Where does
and it could be dippity. You've got to do it now, haven't you?
Dippity.
But it's a good book for you, right? If you're interested in languages and stuff.
Yeah.
The Unfolding of Language is a good book.
Okay. Unfolding of Language. That's
about the birth of language.
There is. I have got a book here which I haven't read. It's called The Structure of Magic. I haven't read it yet, but that is The Structure of Magic is essentially about language, but more in the sense of the language we use and how you can sort of. I think it's, from what I understand, is how you can use the language that people are using to you to understand what they're really saying. So like if somebody's going through a tough time, unless they say I'm having a tough time, you're not going to know necessarily, but you can pick up on some of the language. It ties in with neuro-linguistic programming, so NLP. It ties in with that quite significantly, as far as I'm aware. Like I say, I haven't read that book, but it's using the language that people are using to understand what they're going through, but also on the flip side to structure your language in a way that people are going to listen, and that can be useful for fucking loads of stuff, public speaking, job interviews, business pitches, sales pitches, like anything, there's the way that we structure the wording or the language that we use and stuff. It has such a significant impact on how somebody receives it. Coming back to serendipitous, so it says serendipity. It is derived from the Sanskrit word, which I'm not even going to try and pronounce, and the word has been exported into many other languages with the general meaning of unexpected discovery or fortunate chance.
See, I prefer mine. Stars aligned.
Yeah, and this is kind. Actually, sorry.
What was that book called? The Magic one?
There's a few different. To be honest, there's a few different things here. There's some sort of English writer and politician called Horace Walpole in 1754. Basically, he said something about it as well, and apparently, I think serendipitous. I think by the sounds of it, the concept of it comes from Sanskrit, but then I think that this guy has sort of put his own spin on it. But anyway, no, The Structure of Magic. That book is called, the one I was talking about, and. I've got it here somewhere. So, Richard,
another great book. Since You Love the Dutch Culture.
Yeah, a book about language and therapy. That's what it's called. I don't know if you can see that there. It's got a magician on it.
By Richard who?
Richard Bandler and John Grinder. So yeah, sorry. What was the book you were going to say about?
Oh yeah, so. This has become book club, hasn't it? Like Radio 2. Why the Dutch are different.
Okay.
Why the Dutch are different. That's a great book, and like Since You Love the Dutch Culture as well. And I guess you said maybe you're going to go over and see Barefoot Dutchman. Maybe what's his name? Anton.
Anton, yeah, Anton Newtonboom. I love his surname. It's great. Yeah, we've got no plans to meet up, but we definitely will at some point. Yeah, I think. I'm not entirely sure if he is. I don't know if he's back in the Netherlands now, or if he's back, because he was back in the Netherlands for a little while. I'm not sure where he is in the world now. I haven't looked at his socials I haven't seen any of his stuff for a couple of weeks, so I'm not too sure where he is. But it'd be good to go over there. I love Holland anyway. That being said, the extent of Holland that I've visited is Amsterdam. So I've been to Amsterdam maybe 3-4 times. Yeah. And I love it out there in general, like I said, but Holland as a whole, I haven't really explored, but I can imagine just based off Amsterdam that it is such a, it's an incredible country.
Yeah, well, this guy who wrote the book, he's British but lives over there, and and he talks about their culture, their history, and why they're so laid back and stuff. But yeah, I gleaned a lot from those interviews you did, especially from Robin. I thought one thing he talked about was his PTSD, because obviously he's a Marine, isn't he? But he said it didn't really hit him until he was with his wife out in the Netherlands one day. And I really related to that, because after my dad died, I took a while to process it and had the counselling and stuff, and then it was about a year later, almost 2 years later, in the winter, which I used to really struggle with winters, right? I don't now, but that's because I don't drink through winter anymore. I use a sunlight lamp, which I've got on now, by Lumi. Vitamin D, I know you're big on your vitamins. I use DHA, so that's I use vegan capsules from Amazon. DHA is actually not krill oil. What is it? Algae oil. So it's algae oil instead of fish oil, because they say the fish just eat the algae anyway, so they get it straight from the algae. And I use vitamin B12 and stuff, and I'm vegan. I go outside as often as possible, exercise as much as possible. Like you, I go into nature as often as possible. But this particular Christmas, it was a form of PTSD, I think, that struck me, because my son was just born, so 2016, and he was literally a tiny baby, and we were out as a family, loads of us, right? Ice skating of all places, and somebody took my seat, right? Somebody took my seat, and that was it. Boom. And like I look back now, and I think some of it might have been like a bit territorial, maybe with my son, because he was, in my arms and stuff. But now I look back and I know more about PTSD, and hearing what Robin said, I realise that's exactly what it was, because I hadn't processed it. I don't think, maybe I'd had counselling at that time, but I definitely I didn't talk to a doctor, about antidepressants and stuff. So just blew up, and luckily I was able to bring it down. But afterwards I had to apologise and stuff to whoever nicked my seat, and that's what I know. Robin went through. Obviously, he went to serve tours and stuff, so it's a completely different thing. But I just think anyone who's lost somebody, it's a traumatic event. You may be suffering post-traumatic stress syndrome, because that's exactly what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Post-traumatic stress. And it was only my little sister said she had.
I was going to say, have you come across Gabor Mate? Have you listened to any of his stuff?
Do you know what? I heard an interview with him and Dr. Rangan Chatterjee on his podcast. Have you heard Rangan Chatterjee's thing?
Yeah, I haven't listened to it, but he's. I'm pretty sure he's the one that. Yeah, I think it was him. I'm sure he had Susanna Solberg on quite recently. So Susanna Solberg, she's brilliant as well. She's a doctor. She's doctor of but she's like, her thing is all about heat and cold therapy. So she talks about sauna, talks about the sea, cold water dipping. But she's broken down the science as to why, the different amounts of each of them. So 57 minutes of heat a week. 57 minutes of the sauna a week. Right. Any more than that, and it's sort of like, what's the word? The benefits are capped at 57 minutes. It just stagnates after that, pretty much. And 11 minutes are cold. But if you have more than 11 minutes, they don't know if the results go up, down, or stagnate and stay the same. So, but yeah, she talks about contrast therapy. So going into the cold and then going into the sauna and then back and forth. And just there's so many different studies that are coming out, now about that. Anyway, she went on to that podcast with that Chatterjee, but actually this is her book, so anyone wants to have a look. Oh, I've lost my light. Winter Swimming by Susanna Solberg, so shout out to her. Cool little book, actually. I haven't read it yet, but I only ordered it a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't really had the time, actually, to be honest. Where's my light gone? So yeah, but the point I was going to make with Gabor Mate is he's been on loads of podcasts recently. Like, I pretty much thought until about 2 months ago, probably 2-3 months ago, I thought he was like, one of these sort of, I don't know, people from a couple of hundred years ago, like a philosopher from a couple of hundred years ago, talks about all this amazing stuff. And like, I didn't realize like he's actually alive today. Like, he's in his 70s, but he is alive today. And he was, I can't remember if he was a Holocaust survivor or if it was his grandparents died in the Holocaust. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. So, he talks about growing up with, like his parents and stuff who have been through then this significant trauma. All the people around him have been through this significant trauma, the trauma he went through in his life as well. And he talks about how most people, pretty much everybody, has had some sort of trauma at some point, whether, we recognize it as trauma or not. Like a loud bang, for example, can trigger like a traumatic response and things like that to a certain degree. Or, somebody somebody cheats on you in a relationship, that can be a form of trauma as well. There's and what we don't realize as well, I think, especially in his is most like early development or early stages of life for kids who have had stuff happening, like parents shouting in front of them, and the trauma that develops from that. And it's like unraveling the onion is very, very difficult to do later on in life, but that's essentially, he talks quite heavily about that. So anyone who's, interested in trauma, or even if you just, to be honest, I think it's worth everybody having a look at like somebody like Gabor Mate and just listening to some of the stuff, because I think it's interesting how much you resonate with it or how much you take from it. Like, and it makes sense for you. Like, you mentioned about Robin, about the PTSD thing. I think that people would probably have a lot that same sort of thing with Gabor Mate, and he's been on Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett. He's been on, I'm sure I watched him on Joe Rogan. He's been on School of Greatness with Lewis something, can't think of his name. School of Greatness, or the podcast. He's been on quite a number of them, and very, very interesting in all honesty. And he goes against what. I'd say it goes against a lot what the doctors and and people say, actually, in terms of how to interact with, like, a baby or a child and things like that. It's quite interesting, so I'll have we'll have a look at that.
Yeah, no, I learned a lot from even the one I listened to, which was the Rangan Chatterjee one. I remember him saying something like, don't put your kid on the naughty step, because they'll subconsciously think that their opinion isn't valid, or that they're being ousted from the family, So that's one thing that I've taken forward, is I don't put my kids on the naughty step anymore if they're kicking off, And he talks about his own son, doesn't he, and his relationship with his son growing up, and how he has a good relationship now with his son, I think. But when he was younger, he wasn't as kind,
Yeah.
But yeah, I took a lot from that interview, actually, about parenting, and I can see why triggers from childhood could stay with you till later life, because one of the things, again, I think Nathan Joseph talked about it on your thing, but he lost his granddad when he was quite young, and I lost my granddad when I was 11. I was really, really close to him. Right, he was a soldier from World War II. He served in Burma and stuff, but he was a lovely, lovely guy. So I spent a lot of time there, growing up, and used to play with all his radios and listen to aircraft going over and record ourselves. Me and my siblings on the old tape recorder. And you're too young to remember tapes, right?
I do remember tapes. I do remember tapes, just about. I think I was the last generation before they went out.
But then he died.
Sorry, go on.
Great quality. I've still got the tapes of that we made, and they're great quality. The sound on them. Anyway, so when he died, I was like 11, and there was no counselling or anything then. It was 1992 or whatever. There was no counselling. It was just get on with it. So, as well as that, I went to see him laid in state, right? And I don't think I should have gone 10, 11 years old, but I was offered the chance to go and say goodbye, kind of thing, and I don't know if it was very good for me, but I honestly think from that one event, I suffered a little bit of not post-traumatic stress, but definitely mini episodes. Because then through school, adolescence hit, started smoking, started drinking, started, hanging around. I played rugby, but at the same time, I could be a bit of a troublemaker. And I think, honestly, it was from losing that role model in my life. And at the same time, I had plenty of support. I grew up in a decent enough house. It wasn't, there was no abuse or anything. But my dad could shout occasionally, but got chased with a slipper a few times, around the house. But genuinely, I think there needs to be more kind of done for young people who lose older relatives, and I think now we live in an age where they are encouraged to talk.
Yeah, I was going to say. So when you were saying about that, I mean, I've got a very, very similar story. So, like yourself, what you said there, my grandfather was a major, person in my life. Probably, like I said, I would say I was probably closest to him. So my two grandfathers, definitely really, really close with both of them. Really, really close with my mother's father, and it was he was the first major person that I'd lost in my life. So I'd been to maybe, I can't remember if I'd had many deaths. Like, I know funerals I'd been to and stuff before that. I don't think there was many. Definitely nobody close. But yeah, he passed away, and it was of a heart attack. So it was really, really sudden. Wasn't expected, like that. So I remember I was about for 15, I think, at the time, about 15. And I remember that because it was such a, really challenging thing to get through. I remember sitting at the funeral, like, however long, like 2-3 weeks later, and somebody gave me a pint, I was only 15, they gave me a pint though, and, and I didn't drink it. I just sat there, I was like, just staring at it, I was in a daze. But what I know you said about the trauma and how it affects you in different ways, so I never really considered how that impacted my life up until about 2 years ago. So my cousin, she was about, I can't remember exactly how old she was when she died. I think she was about 36 maybe. So she was young, and she passed away, I think it was in the late part of 2020. And, she'd struggled with her mental health. She struggled with, depression and things like that. But, she, through certain behaviours or whatever, like, had a lot of other issues, health issues and stuff, which started materialising. One of them was, I can't remember exactly what it was, something to do with the heart. But then, yeah, she quite suddenly then passed away of a heart-related issue. And, obviously went to the funeral and stuff, and it was, horrible, especially because, she had children and, she was really young. But I noticed around that time, and for a few weeks afterwards, I was struggling with, not struggling, I was a little bit more anxious, a little bit more, I was like, a bit more conscious of my heart, and getting anxiety maybe about, having a heart attack and stuff. I was just really conscious of it. And that has been something that's recurring over time. Now and again, I'll be like, oh, I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack, or like, I've always just, like a little twinge. I think a lot of people experience that, a little twinge. You're like, oh, what's that? But I noticed around that period that I was experiencing it more. And then I just kind of realised, oh, fuck. I was like, someone else who's close to me has passed away of a heart-related issue. The first person that I lost in my life, who was a major influence, and I was really, really close with, passed away very suddenly of a heart-related issue. And I thought, that's trauma there. Like, that is literally, a trauma response or a trigger that is making me think, fuck, like, do you know what I mean? It's like, it's just taking you back to it. And that's essentially how it materializes. It's never that, what's the word? It's never that sort of in your face, but now and again you'll notice, you'll go, okay, maybe I think like this, or maybe I've got that particular thought because of this event that happened, and we start to connect the dots and make sense of things. I think the good thing about recognizing that is going, I'm only thinking like this because of this, and I, forgive myself for doing that, but I'm going to let this go. I don't want this to take a hold of me anymore. And just keep telling yourself that. And, over time, then you start to like push away from it and recognize that, it's not serving you in a way. So that's kind of what I've done. And I would say that I'm definitely a lot more at peace with it now. It doesn't seem to, it doesn't seem to have a hold on me anymore, now that I recognize it. It's like that spotlight thing, you're taking away the shadow by putting the spotlight on it.
Yeah.
So you can see it coming.
100%. And I think, it's just like, but that's what I think you get when you've done a bit of work on yourself, maybe, and that's what brings it back to like when you've got some sort of philosophy or some sort of grounding or presence or some toolkit, like we talked about, isn't it? When you've got a toolkit you can go to, that's why I think it's important that we teach that, and we encourage young people to develop their own toolkit, because then when trauma does happen, and it will, shit happens in everyone's lives, and this is part of the Stoic principles. It says prepare yourself for losing people, prepare yourself for losing your AirPods. Do you know what I mean? Because you will, you will drop your favorite mug, and when it happens, it's less of a surprise.
Yeah.
And as you said, then you can focus your attention on it and go, all right, so actually this week I've been a little bit more anxious, but I've just lost somebody, I've just lost somebody, and therefore it's brought up old emotions. Even if it's like this year we lost my uncle, and he had dementia for a couple of years, and for me he was another role model. He was my dad's brother, but I felt I lost him when I could no longer phone him after dementia had really set in. And even though I didn't see him because of lockdown and stuff, I wasn't able to visit him because he was in a care home. it didn't come as much of a shock when he did finally die, even though it's terrible for his wife, obviously, and his son, Chris, who lives in Australia. For me, I felt I'd lost a role model, but it was ages ago it was 2 years ago when I could no longer call him. Do you know what I mean? But then, thanks to Stoicism, I was able to go, I knew this day was coming, and I'm able to process it much better, you know. And then another coping strategy I got from Cruse Bereavement was kind of focus on good memories. So always write, if you get a good memory from someone that you've lost, write it down in your journal, and then you can flick to that page whenever you need reminding. And that's why I think comedy is a form of journaling. You know, you can talk about stories where you did DIY with your dad and you had these sayings, or, you know, a story that we always tell was a great auntie of ours. We were having Christmas dinner, and she was about 80 at that time, and midway through dinner now, right, big Welsh family table, she just falls off her chair onto the floor.
Yeah.
And obviously we feared the worst.
Yeah.
So they called the ambulance and everything. My dad did the bloody Heimlich maneuver on her for some, we don't even know why he was doing the Heimlich. He thought she was choking. And she let out, great Auntie Elsie let out this really big fart, and then woke up and just went, oh, all right.
Oh, that's one of those.
Genuinely, a massive fart.
Yeah.
And then she was fine. So the ambulance came and checked her. They went, oh, she just nodded off at the table.
That's one of. I was going to say that's one of those stories that you bring up every Christmas time. That is, isn't it? Definitely.
Yes. Yeah. So like it was a National Lampoons type moment. You know? But anyway, so yeah. So if you can keep the memory alive, I think, you know, maybe with your granddad as well. Just like sometimes revisit nice memories of him, and you know, and then that helps. But definitely, I think it is traumatic, and I think, especially when they're so close.
Yeah, I was going to say that another way of doing that. So, like, I think that's a really, really good thing for anybody listening or watching to do, like you said, to write down those particular memories and stuff. Like, I think that's really what I love about journaling is the ability to kind of put all of those things in like a memory bank that you can refer back to at any point. But my friend Emma, so she's I think it's the first person I've done a podcast with, actually, Emma Price. So she's on Instagram, she's Emma's Happy List, and she created a podcast series called Emma's Happy List. Basically, what she does, she literally has a list of things that make her happy. So like floating in the sea and all this different stuff. But what she was doing, she was having guests on to write something that makes them happy as well. So like something to put on the happy list. And then, you know, the idea really was that people would listen to it and they would be like, oh, what's on my happy list? What makes me happy? And then listen to what other people are thinking. Actually, I want to try that, you know. And it's just she's such a lovely person, such a high energy person, really, really positive, you know, and a happy soul. And I think that, you know, just doing that as a particular activity, it's such an amazing way to actually recognize what works for you, what's good for you, and when you're really in a bit of a pickle or you're going through a tough time, you can literally just open that book and go, these are the things that make me happy, and just by thinking about those things, it's going to make you feel happier. But then you can go, I haven't floated in the sea for a little while, I'm going to go do that. I haven't seen my, you know, nan for a while, for example, I'm going to do that. Like, it just gives you, like, it can be a little bit of a prompt. And there's another thing, I'm not too sure if he's got a website, but there's a guy from Swansea, and he's got like these cards, so like little cards called This Day I Am, and it's worth having a look online, or anybody listening, have a look online, or you know, if you pop me a message, I can get his details for you. But it basically, on every single card, they're like trump cards, but it'll say, this day I am going to the cinema alone, or something like that. It becomes a prompt specifically, I think, for like depression and things like that. It gives people a little prompt to actually go and to do something, you know, specific. And yeah, you know, or even if you just look at it from a boredom standpoint, you know, if you're just looking for something to do. Hello. You
Sorry, my boys.
Yeah, so even if you're looking at something
There's
to
Noah.
do,
Say hello.
hello. Yeah, no, I think
Hello.
there's a good few things out there like that.
Yeah, I've just found his Instagram now. I'll bring it up. I think it's. Hang on. Give me 2 seconds. I'll come and see you now. I won't be long. Okay, I'm nearly done. Just a second. Love you. The joys of working from home. See you in a minute. Why are you not kickboxing? Don't want to go.
That's
Sorry.
all right.
That usually happens working from home, doesn't it? It's like that. Remember that BBC News thing where the kid walks in the room and then
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah,
they're trying to get.
I've seen that.
So I think I've just found it.
Yes, yeah, that looks like it. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
This day I am. It's backwards for you, isn't it? But
No, I can see that. Yeah, it's right. It is the right
what's
way.
the art? Yeah. This,
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. It's a really, really
this
good little
day,
thing, and I think stuff like that is just, it's so important. It's so simple, as well. But it just, gives you a little bit of a, a little bit of a boost, a little bit of motivation to just go on to do stuff. But I mean, just to finish it off, I know your boy's he's definitely like he's missing his father now. I was going to say, just to finish it off, I mean, if there's one particular thing that you could tell like a younger version of yourself that you feel like you wish you knew back then, what would that be? Do you think? I've just thrown that one on
that's
you.
a tough one.
Yeah, I should have probably given you more prep for that, but I like throwing it on last minute.
No. Mind, I could be pretending to be surprised, couldn't I? But really, I've done some prep on this because
Yeah.
I've listened to the podcast before.
Yeah. Yeah, I might have asked this before.
I would say, yeah, I would say, no, I think it's a nice sign off for you. I really do. I think it's a nice way to end the podcast. So, I would say if I was talking to my younger self, I'd say talk sooner. Talk sooner and travel more. Even though I've traveled quite a bit anyway, I would say travel more because you can never have enough travel. And I would say just and try and write every day. And I just think, just like you said there, life I think is about what makes you happy, and it's about. I heard something good the other day that said it's about experiences and the intensity of those experiences.
Yeah.
When you think about it, that's it, isn't it? That's life.
Yeah.
It's about intense, and I know you appreciate intense experiences. You jogged up Penny Van this morning with your top off, so I know you appreciate what that means.
Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah, that is 100% an intense experience. I know what quote you mean. Actually, I have seen. I've seen that quote. I can't think exactly what it is, but yeah, I know which one you mean.
Yeah.
No, awesome. No, I appreciate you coming on. Honestly,
that's it, isn't it?
Sorry, go on.
It's been a pleasure. No, I was just going to say that's pretty much it, isn't it? In a nutshell, that's life, and for me, it's relationships, it's diet, it's exercise, and it's light, getting as much light as you can, especially in winter.
Yeah.
Even 30 minutes a day, light is really good for us, I think. Even on a cloudy day, that's something off Rongan Chatterjee's podcast.
Yeah, and Andrew
low alcohol if you're
Huberman
feeling bad,
talks about that as well. Actually, and Andrew Huberman, yeah, it's definitely the two of them. I'll probably put the links in this podcast now. So the two of them, so Andrew Huberman, he talks about that as well. Like the importance of getting outside with the daylight and stuff like that. That's a big one for me. I talk about that quite a lot. Like you said, the same as yourself. Because it's like sunshine state of mind. Once you are having a bit of sunshine, when it's sunny outside or when it's summer, people are generally happy, and it's just it's no coincidence. We're not meant to be inside all of the time and in these buildings and in darkness and stuff like that. We're supposed to be out in nature, in the sunlight, and and getting that interaction and stuff. But no, I think that's quite a nice little note to end it on, to be fair. But I mean, if you want to I'll put your socials in the link to this as well. But your Instagram handle is Nat Webb comedy, isn't it? NAT Webb with 2 B's comedy.
That's correct.
Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And you can find me on all the socials, Nat Webb Comedy.
Yeah.
And I started a little blog as well. That's called thekidsneednewshoes.com.
Cool.
And that was set up during lockdown. And that's really there just to put my thoughts down and develop some of my comedy characters, really.
Awesome.
But yeah, you'll find me at Nat Webb Comedy, and the rest is kind of a spin-off from that. So,
There we are.
you
Perfect.
know, it's been a pleasure though. You know, the only thing I was going to say in addition was just try and help others and find your purpose, which you touched on earlier. And I think in doing that, you know, and this is what you were talking about in finding your purpose, is finding what makes you happy, helps others naturally, and then when you help others, you're helping yourself, aren't you? So, you know,
110%. I think it's
anything to keep you.
the greatest thing we can do, like you said, in life, is figure out what it is that you've got to offer the world, and then let that light shine. So no, I think that's a perfect way to end it. No, I really appreciate you coming on. I love this chat. I think this is fucking amazing. I think it's going to help a lot of people. So yeah, thank you very much, and well, have a good evening. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Take care, man. Bye bye.
You too. Catch up soon, right? Look after yourself. Bye, mate.